There's a lot of discourse about, why women commence more divorces than men. And there's a lot of discourse about the impact of no-fault divorce. And these are all things that I think get thrown into this dialogue and weaponized in ways that aren't honest and aren't effective, because they're used by people on, let's say the red pill space, or, whatever we want to call it, to say, well, you can't marry women because, look, women commence divorce actions, and 73% of divorces are commenced by women. So that means women are coming into the casino, making all the money that they can, and then cashing their chips out 73%.
Why does that statistic is true, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
So how is that not a sort of indictment on the way that women approach marriage?
Facts all come with points of view, and here's the thing that maybe a divorce lawyer sees that other people don't see. Who commences a divorce action is not always, I would even say not often, an indicator of who wanted to end the marriage. It just means who filed the paperwork. So if a woman marries a man and she realizes, hey, I've cashed out everything I can for this guy and now I want to bounce on the relationship, I'm filing a divorce action. You're right. If 73% of divorces were commenced by women under those circumstances, that's a strong argument. 50% would be a strong argument. The reality is, much more frequently than that, I see a guy who runs off with his secretary, stops paying any expenses related to the residence. He's been the breadwinner of the family for so many years, and he's not going to just set up like a franchise. Like, he's leaving this wife and 2 kids, and a man who leaves his wife for his mistress just leaves a job opening. So now he's going to go to the mistress, and he's going to have a family with her now, but he's not going to take care of his responsibilities towards the family he already has. What does that woman do? She comes into my office and she says, help. The mortgage isn't being paid. He changed the utilities to my name. I don't have a job, or I have a job as a teacher part-time because I've been raising our children. What do I do? And I have to say to her, you have to file for divorce. And she says, well, I don't want a divorce. I'm not the one who wanted a divorce. I want to figure out a way to reconcile. I want to go to counseling. I want to work it out. I'll forgive him for the transgression if we could just figure it out for our kids. But the problem is, you can't force someone to stay married to you. You can't force someone to come back home and pay the bills unless you've filed a divorce action. So we file divorce actions all the time for people who do not want to get divorced, but who are in a position. I can't just go to court without an action and say, Judge, can you issue an order? I have to have an underlying action, and the action is an action for divorce. So that's why that statistic is so wildly misleading. Now, again, I'm not saying that there aren't plenty of examples of women taking the advantages that the system gives to them financially or when it comes to custody, and weaponizing that against men. But you cannot just look at that statistic and say, oh, that's proof that women are cashing out of marriages. I cannot tell you how many clients, how many women in a 25-year career just in my office I have seen who do not want to commence a divorce action. They want to figure it out. They want to reconcile. They want to go to mediation if they are going to split up. They want to be friendly and figure it out. But the only way to get a judge involved and temporary orders in place is by filing something.
How often do you think, because the hypothetical scenario you just laid out there seems like a pretty clear good guy versus bad guy scenario.
Yeah.
Of course, I guess
it's pretty common.
Pretty common. And if this is a real life scenario and we were to go talk to the man, he might say something like, well, yeah, I did move out of the house, but for 10 years before that, she was whatever. She was emotionally withdrawn.
Sure.
It was a dead marriage.
Sure.
Not that would justify what he did, but
they would say that.
So I guess my question is, in your experience, how often in a broken marriage is there a clear this guy or this woman is wrong and this one's right? Or is it always just a jumble of both sides are wrong?
I often say that the truth is at the bottom of a bottomless pit when it comes to marriage. Because I feel like if you say, it's one of the reasons why no fault caught on. Because fault-based divorce got everybody really caught up, especially the lawyers, in proving whose fault it was that you were going to get divorced. And it really was exactly the discussion. I mean, sometimes you have the perfect villain and the perfect, victim, but a lot of the time there's complexity to it. It's, well, he was sleeping with this person. Right, but that's because, you weren't sleeping with him. Well, I wasn't sleeping with him because he never talks to me. Well, I don't talk to you because all you do is fight when we talk. And it's like you kind of go, all right, well, you're right. Like none of the things you guys did were the solution. Like the solution was not stop talking to him completely. And then it wasn't stop sleeping with him. And then it wasn't stop, so you should sleep with somebody else. Like there were ways to solve this, that didn't involve letting it metastasize in the way that it has. But, I do think sometimes it's not that nuanced. I mean, I've said before that, there's 10 commandments in the Bible, and 2 of them are don't sleep with people other than your spouse. I mean, thou shalt not kill got 1. But don't covet your neighbor's wife and don't commit adultery. It's like God was saying, like, don't steal, don't bear false witness against your neighbor, don't sleep with someone you're not married to. Seriously, don't sleep with someone you're not married to. And I think this shows you how long this has been a problem, a real problem in societies, all kinds of societies, infidelity, adultery, our inability or unwillingness to control our sexual desires, And sometimes you see pretty clear examples of that in divorces where people are just running around like they weren't married. You're seeing it more in the modern culture where there's really not people aren't like put up as heroes for being fidelitous in their marriage and being dedicated to their kids. It's not really as sexy of a thing, as I moved on. I had to find who I truly was. And again, there's a gender imbalance there too. A man has an affair, he's a lying scumbag. A woman has an affair, it's the guy's fault most of the time. Well, he pushed her into the arms of another man. She had to figure out who she was. She had to find comfort. She's human. She deserves comfort. If I dared in court to say, well, of course my client slept with his secretary. He needed comfort. He's human. He was an eat, pray, love kind of a journey. I'd be held in contempt. But in the modern time, this is an acceptable argument to make.
It's certainly true that for men, infidelity can never be a journey.
No, ever.
Only women can go on those kinds of journeys.
Yeah.
In a weird way, I guess I take a weird sort of comfort in the idea that at least a large number of divorces, there's not a clear bad guy. Yeah. Because then it feels like, well, as you pointed out, even if one person in this whole storm had tried to do the right thing, it may have saved the whole thing. But I guess when I get people become nervous, and I think one of the reasons they don't want to get married in the first place is they worry that they'll be put in a situation where it could all go to hell, totally outside of their control, and they might end up married to some sort of like sociopath without knowing it. And then you can have someone just rip everything away from you no matter if you do everything perfectly.
Yeah. And everything they could rip from you in a divorce, it's really everything. Like it's the most fundamental things. Like when you get to see your children, it's your finances in a real tangible way. Like people get broken financially in a divorce. Not just even the process of divorce is incredibly expensive, but just cutting everything in half and creating support obligations based on earning capacity. Like, there's so many ways this can go wrong. So marrying someone is such an unbelievable act of faith and trust in the present you, but also the future you. Like if you get married in your 20s, will 40-something-year-old you still be the same person, or at least grow in similar ways? Like, will you grow in the same direction? Because women and men have midlife crisis and have, just fundamentally shift and change in sometimes really profound ways. And now your destiny is inextricably tied to this person's destiny. And more so, your children, who you love more than yourself most of the time, are tied to this person's destiny too. And this person now knows you better than anyone in the whole world. They know your weak spots. They know what gets to you. I mean, there's nothing more frightening than someone who you've trusted with everything coming at you in the other direction.
How often do you think it is that you have a situation where either the man or the woman is just a total villain, a total sociopath, and the others, the people, the other party involved really couldn't have done anything to prevent it all from going south. Like, do you think happens often?
Those are two distinct questions. So one, I would say, is thankfully it's infrequent that you have someone who just fundamentally, like, completely fooled a person, like a perfect sociopath, like a malignant narcissist, or who just was totally like a normal person and then just did this 180. So that doesn't happen often. When it does, I think more often people don't want to see what's in front of them. So people will come in and they'll say to me, like, I can't believe he's being so petty and vindictive. And I'll say, well, what was he like during the marriage to people? And they're like, well, he was petty and vindictive. I'm like, well, why would he be any different in the divorce? Like, you're divorcing the person you were married to. So if you're married to a person who's like reasonable, thoughtful, puts the kids first, concedes the possibility of their own error, that person, when you divorce them, is very often exactly that same person. So you're going to have, so like, I don't do as many straightforward, reasonable divorces anymore, but that is the majority of divorce. The majority of divorces are people just saying, okay, one or both of us have decided this has to end, and let's try to do it in a way that preserves our co-parenting relationship. You don't hear about that. It's not interesting. Like, I don't get invited to parties, but if I got invited to a party and somebody said, what do you do for a living? And I said, oh, I'm a divorce lawyer. They go, oh my God, you must have such stories. But like, they don't want the story of, yeah, there were these two people and then they grew apart and ultimately they decided to divorce, but they've treated each other with respect. Like, they don't want that. They want the one where I'm like, yeah, and then he took a chainsaw and he cut the bed in half and he said, you can have this half. And that's the story they want to hear. Those are the people that talk about their divorce for the next 15, 20 years. Someone actually took a chainsaw, cut the bed in half. Yeah. You'd be amazed how many things I've had people come in and tell me that they got cut in half, that their spouse left as a symbol of the broken home, a cut in half, whatever. There's so many things.
Hey, YouTube, thanks for listening to the show. If you'd like access to my full show with no ads, you should go to dailywire.com and use promo code Walsh to get 2 months free on all annual plans. See you there.